The rain hammered against the glass doors of St. Catherine's private hospital as Dimitri Voss burst through them at 2:47 a.m., his $3,000 Italian suit soaked through and his heart pounding with the kind of fear that money couldn't fix. At 36, he controlled a pharmaceutical empire worth billions, commanded boardrooms across 3 continents, and could make or break careers with a single phone call. But none of that mattered now. His 4-month-old daughter, Serafina, was dying. For 3 weeks, she'd been wasting away in the pediatric intensive care unit, her tiny body rejecting every formula, every feeding tube, every desperate attempt to keep her alive. The best doctors money could buy stood helpless as she grew weaker by the day, her cries becoming fainter, her beautiful dark eyes losing their spark. Dimitri's wife Elena had died in a car crash when Serafina was just 6 weeks old, leaving him to navigate parenthood alone. He'd hired the most expensive nannies, consulted with world-renowned pediatric specialists, even flew in experts from Switzerland and Japan. Nothing worked. "She's failing to thrive," Dr. Morrison had told him that afternoon, his face grave. "If we can't get her to feed properly within the next 48 hours. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Dimitri had already lost his wife. He couldn't lose his daughter, too. The elevator seemed to crawl as it climbed to the 7th floor. The pediatric wing was usually bustling with nurses and activity, but at this hour, the hallways were eerily quiet. Too quiet. As Dimitri approached Serafina's room, he heard something that made him freeze in his tracks. Soft humming, a woman's voice, gentle and melodic, singing a lullaby he didn't recognize. His daughter hadn't made a peaceful sound in weeks. Heart racing, he crept closer to the partially open door and peered inside. What he saw stopped his world completely. A woman sat in the bedside chair, her rich bronze skin glowing in the soft light. She had curves that couldn't be hidden by her scrubs, full breasts, a narrow waist, hips that spoke of feminine strength. Her dark hair fell in waves around her shoulders as she looked down with such tenderness that it took his breath away. In her arms, nestled against her bare breast, was Serafina. His dying daughter was nursing peacefully, her tiny fist curled against the stranger's skin, her cheeks fuller than they'd been in weeks. For the first time since Elena's death, Serafina looked alive. The woman's honey-colored eyes lifted and met his through the gap in the door. Instead of shame or fear, he saw tears streaming down her face. Not from guilt, but from something deeper, something that made his chest tighten with emotion he couldn't name. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice carrying a musical accent. She was crying so hard, and nothing would calm her. "I tried everything else first, I swear." Dimitri pushed the door open slowly, his movements careful. The woman started to shift as if to cover herself, but Serafina made a soft sound of protest, her grip tightening on the stranger's breast. "Don't," Dimitri said quietly, his voice rougher than intended. "Don't stop." He sank into the chair across from her, close enough to see his daughter's face. Serafina's hollow cheeks were already fuller, her grayish skin glowing pink with health. She was feeding with an intensity that spoke of desperate hunger finally being satisfied. "How long?" he asked. "About 40 minutes, the woman replied, looking down at Serafina with such love it made his heart ache. "I found her crying in a way that reminded me of—" She paused, fresh tears spilling over, "of my own daughter. Before she died." The words hit him like physical blows. This woman had lost her child, was still producing milk meant for a baby who would never need it again, and she was giving that gift to his dying daughter. "You have milk because—" "I had a daughter," she whispered. "Celeste. She would have been 7 months old now. She died 4 months ago from complications during surgery. My body still thinks she's coming home." They sat in charged silence, broken only by Serafina's contented sounds. Dimitri watched his daughter's face relax into peace he hadn't seen since Elena's death. "What's your name?" he asked. "Isadora Moreau. I'm a pediatric nurse here." She shifted Serafina to burp her, and the baby complied immediately before settling back to nurse. "This was supposed to be the end of my shift." "Supposed to be?" "I assume you'll be reporting me to administration. I know what I've done crosses every professional boundary." Dimitri leaned forward, studying her face in the soft light. "Tell me something, Isadora. In your professional opinion, how long has Serafina been slowly starving?" The directness seemed to surprise her. She looked down at the baby, considering carefully. Her muscle tone suggests weeks of inadequate nutrition. "If I had to guess, she's been rejecting food since the trauma began. Every specialist, every formula, every feeding method money could buy." Dimitri's jaw clenched. Nothing worked. She screams through every attempt. Some premature babies can't process artificial nutrition, Isadora said softly. Their systems are too immature, or they have sensitivities that don't show up on tests. They need this. She gestured to herself, color rising in her cheeks. The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to voice. My body produces enough milk for triplets, she admitted quietly. It has for months. The doctors said it would stop eventually, but grief makes the body hold on to hope longer than the mind wants to. Dimitri stood and moved to the window, staring out at the city lights. His reflection showed a man who had aged years in months, hollow-eyed and desperate. If I asked you to come work for me, he said without turning around, not as a hospital nurse, but as Serafina's private caregiver, would you consider it? The silence stretched so long he finally turned back. Isadora was staring at him with an expression caught between hope and disbelief. You want me to nurse your daughter? She asked. I want my daughter to live, Dimitri said simply. And for the first time in months, she looks like she might. I can pay you 10 times what the hospital does, Dimitri continued, his green eyes intense. You'd have your own suite in my penthouse, access to anything you need, the best healthcare money can buy. All I ask is that you feed my daughter and help her grow strong. Isadora looked down at Serafina, who had finished nursing and was sleeping with the boneless contentment of a truly satisfied baby. For weeks, this child had been slowly dying. Now, in less than an hour, she looked healthier than she had since birth. And what about you? Isadora asked quietly, meeting his gaze. What do you need from this arrangement? The question was loaded with subtext that made the air between them electric. Dimitri felt desire stir for the first time since Elena's death, looking at this woman who held his daughter with such natural grace. I need to know she's safe, he said carefully, though his eyes betrayed deeper hungers. I need to know someone loves her the way you clearly already do. The word love hit her like lightning. Did she already love this baby? Looking down at Serafina's peaceful face, Isadora realized the answer was yes. Completely, irrevocably yes. Your social circle won't approve, she said. A black woman nursing a white baby living in your home. People will talk. Let them talk, Dimitri's voice carried steel. I've buried my wife and watched my daughter waste away. I'm done caring about appearances. Isadora stood gracefully, settling Serafina into her hospital crib, with movements so tender they made his chest ache. When she turned back to him, her expression was resolved. I'll need to give the hospital 2 weeks' notice, she said quietly, and I'll need your word that this arrangement remains professional. Even as she said it, they both felt the lie in those words. The electricity between them was too strong, the intimacy of what they were proposing too intense for mere professionalism. You have my word, Dimitri agreed, though his eyes promised much more. Can you start tomorrow night? I can arrange for you to work reduced shifts here while we transition. I can start tomorrow, Isadora replied. If you're sure about this. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He moved closer, close enough to catch her scent, something warm and feminine that made his body respond in ways he'd forgotten were possible. Welcome to the family, Isadora. 24 hours later, Isadora stood in the marble foyer of Dimitri's penthouse, feeling completely out of her depth. The space was 3 times the size of her entire apartment, decorated with art that belonged in museums and furniture that cost more than she made in a year. Your suite is this way, Dimitri said, leading her down a hallway lined with family photos. She glimpsed images of his deceased wife, a stunning blonde with Elena's radiant smile, obviously born to wealth and privilege. The nursery was a monument to parental love and grief. Every surface held the finest baby furniture money could buy, but everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, evidence of a room prepared with hope and abandoned in despair. I hired 4 different nannies, Dimitri said quietly, adjusting blackout curtains. None could get her to feed properly. She'd scream for hours, then collapse from exhaustion. Isadora moved to the pristine crib, imagining it filled with Serafina's presence. Babies need consistency, the same person, the same routine, the same source of comfort. If I'm going to do this, I need complete authority over her feeding schedule. Whatever you need, and privacy. No observing unless invited. This is intimate work. Dimitri's cheeks colored slightly, and Isadora felt a flutter of awareness at his reaction. Of course. Your room is through here. The connecting suite took her breath away. A king-size bed dominated the space, silk sheets the color of champagne. French doors opened onto a private balcony with city. Views and a sitting area held furniture that looked designed for seduction rather than mere comfort. "This is generous," she managed, acutely aware of how close the bed was to the nursery. "I want you comfortable," Dimitri said, his eyes darkening as he watched her reaction. "I want you to think of this as home. Home." The word sent warmth flooding through her chest. She hadn't had a real home since Celeste died. That first night, Isadora discovered that caring for Serafina in the luxury of the penthouse was entirely different from hospital nursing. Here, there were no time constraints, no other patients demanding attention. She could focus entirely on this one precious child who had already stolen her heart. Serafina woke every 3 hours like clockwork, and each time she latched immediately and fed with desperate hunger. By morning, the baby's face was noticeably fuller, her skin glowing with health. "She looks like a different child," Dimitri said when he found them in the nursery at dawn. He wore silk pajama pants and nothing else, his chest bare and distractingly muscular. "She was starving," Isadora replied, trying not to stare at his perfectly sculpted torso. Her body was shutting down non-essential functions to preserve energy for vital organs. And now she's thriving. Isadora smiled down at Serafina, who was nursing contentedly. "Give her 2 weeks, and she'll be caught up to where she should be developmentally." Dimitri moved closer, studying his daughter's face. "I can't thank you enough for this, for saving her." "You don't need to thank me," Isadora said softly. "Taking care of her, it's healing something in me too." Their eyes met over Serafina's head, and the air between them crackled with awareness. This was more than just a professional arrangement. They were creating something that felt dangerously like a family. 3 days into their arrangement, the careful boundaries Isadora had tried to maintain began crumbling. It started with small things, Dimitri lingering in the nursery doorway during feeding sessions, their hands brushing when he passed her coffee, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. The breaking point came at 2 a.m. on a Thursday night. Serafina had been fussing with what appeared to be gas pains, and Isadora had spent over an hour walking the nursery, gently bouncing and soothing her. When the baby finally settled into peaceful sleep, Isadora emerged from the nursery exhausted and emotionally drained. She nearly collided with Dimitri, who stood in the hallway wearing only silk pajama pants that hung dangerously low on his hips. "Sorry," he murmured, steadying her with hands that lingered on her arms. "I heard her crying and wanted to make sure everything was okay." In the dim light filtering from the nursery, Isadora could see the concern etched on his features, but also something else. Something that made her suddenly aware of her thin nightgown, of how nursing had left her flushed and breathing hard. "She's fine now," she whispered, though neither of them moved apart. "Just growing pains." Dimitri's hand slid down her arms to her wrists, his thumbs tracing over her pulse points. "And you? Are you okay?" The question was loaded with subtext. Was she okay with living in his home, caring for his child, pretending not to notice the electricity between them? "I'm fine," she lied, her body swaying toward his warmth. "Liar," he said softly, his eyes dropping to her lips. "You feel this too." Before she could deny it, his mouth was on hers, hot and demanding and desperate with weeks of suppressed want. Isadora's response was immediate and shameless, her arms winding around his neck, her body molding against his as months of grief and loneliness dissolved in the heat of his kiss. His hands tangled in her hair, angling her head to deepen the contact, and she moaned against his mouth at the first touch of his tongue. She could taste wine on his lips, could feel the hard evidence of his arousal pressing against her belly. "Isadora," he groaned against her throat, finding the spot where her pulse hammered frantically. "I've been going insane watching you, wanting you, trying to convince myself this was just about Serafina." The confession sent liquid fire through her veins. She arched against him, seeking friction, seeking relief from the ache that had been building since their first meeting. "We can't," she gasped, even as her hands explored the muscled planes of his chest. "This complicates everything." "Everything's already complicated," he murmured, backing her against the wall with predatory grace. "The question is whether we're brave enough to stop pretending." The sound of Serafina stirring broke through their haze of desire like cold water. They sprang apart, both breathing hard, staring at each other with expressions caught between want and horror. "This was a mistake," Isadora said, adjusting her nightgown with shaking hands. "Was it?" Dimitri's eyes burned with intensity, because it felt like the most honest thing that's happened since you arrived. "Your daughter is in the next room," she reminded him, though her body still thrummed with need. "My daughter is alive because of you," he countered. Don't you think that changes things between us?" Before she could answer, he turned and walked away, leaving her trembling in the hallway with the taste of him still on her lips. The next morning brought awkward politeness and careful distance. Dimitri left early for business meetings, leaving Isadora alone with Serafina and her increasingly complicated feelings. But when he returned that evening, he carried white roses and an expression of determined resolve. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "About last night? It won't happen again. About last night, about this arrangement, about what's happening between us whether we acknowledge it or not." He set the flowers on the kitchen counter and turned to face her fully. "I'm attracted to you, Isadora. More than I've been to anyone since Elena died, and unless I'm completely wrong, you feel something for me too." She opened her mouth to deny it, but he held up a hand. "I'm not asking you to act on it. I'm not asking you to compromise your position here, but I am asking you to be honest about what's building between us." Isadora looked down at Serafina, who was playing contentedly in her bouncy seat, oblivious to the adult drama swirling around her. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to say that you feel it too, that you lie awake thinking about kissing me again, that you watch me with my daughter and wonder what it would be like if we were a real family." The raw honesty in his voice broke through her defenses. "Yes," she whispered. "I feel it. I think about it. I wonder about things I have no right to wonder about." Relief flooded his features. "Then we're both in trouble." "Yes, we are." She met his eyes, seeing her own confusion reflected there. "Because this isn't just about us. Serafina needs stability, consistency. She doesn't need her caregiver and her father complicating her world. What if we could explore this without disrupting what we've built for her?" Dimitri moved closer, his voice dropping to that low, seductive tone that made her pulse quicken. "What if we could see where this leads without putting her at risk?" "How?" "Let me take you to dinner tomorrow night, away from here, away from our roles as Serafina's caregivers. Let us just be Dimitri and Isadora for a few hours." "And Serafina?" "My sister Helena will watch her. She's been wanting to spend time with her niece, and Serafina takes bottles of expressed milk without problems now." The practical solution made it harder to refuse. And looking into his eyes, seeing the hope there, Isadora felt her resistance crumbling. "One dinner," she conceded, "to see if this is real or just proximity, making us think we want something we don't." Dimitri's smile was devastating. One dinner to discover if we're brave enough to want something real. The restaurant Dimitri chose was intimate by design, soft lighting, private booths, the kind of place where conversations could unfold without interruption. As Isadora followed the host through the hushed dining room, she was acutely aware that no amount of elegant atmosphere could disguise the electricity crackling between them. She had chosen her dress carefully, deep emerald silk that complemented her skin, while remaining professional enough to maintain plausible deniability. But the way Dimitri's eyes darkened when he saw her made it clear that subtlety was pointless. "You look stunning," he said as they were seated, his voice carrying an undertone that sent heat pooling in her belly. "Thank you." She accepted the champagne he'd ordered, needing liquid courage. "You look quite handsome yourself." It was an understatement. In his perfectly tailored black suit, Dimitri looked like temptation wrapped in Italian wool. "How is Serafina settling in with Helena?" she asked, seeking safer ground. "Already asleep when I left. Helena has the magic touch with children." His smile was soft with affection. "She keeps telling me I should have more babies, that Serafina needs siblings." The comment sent an unexpected pang through Isadora's chest. The image of Dimitri with more children stirred something maternal and possessive she had no right to feel. "Do you want more children?" she asked. "I did, before." He paused, considering. "Elena and I planned to have 3 or 4, but after losing her, after nearly losing Serafina, I couldn't imagine facing that fear again. And now?" Dimitri's eyes met hers across the candlelit table. "Now I find myself thinking about possibilities I'd written off, thinking about what it would be like to watch Serafina grow up with siblings, to see her learn to love and protect others." The weight of implication in his words made her breath catch. He wasn't just talking about hypothetical children. He was talking about children they might have together. "That's dangerous thinking," she said quietly. "Most worthwhile thoughts are dangerous." He reached across to cover her hand with his, the contact sending sparks up her arm. "Tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with nursing or babies." The change of subject was deliberate, an attempt to know her as a woman rather than just his daughter's caregiver. "I wanted to be a dancer when I was young," she found herself saying. "Ballet, specifically. I was good enough to audition for professional companies." "What happened?" Reality. Dancing doesn't pay bills unless you're exceptional, and I was merely good, so I chose nursing instead, still helping people but with job security. Do you miss it? Dancing? Sometimes. There's something about complete physical expression, the way music becomes movement. She trailed off, embarrassed by her wistfulness. Dance with me, Dimitri said suddenly. Here? She glanced around the restaurant. Here. Now. He stood and extended his hand. There's music playing, and I want to see you move. The soft jazz filtering through the sound system was hardly ballet music, but something in his expression made refusal impossible. She allowed him to lead her to a small space near the piano, where other couples swayed together. Dimitri's arms came around her with confident possessiveness, one hand at the small of her back, the other cradling her palm against his chest. They moved together with surprising synchrony, her body responding to his lead as if they'd been dancing together for years. You're graceful, he murmured against her ear, his breath sending shivers down her spine. I can see the dancer in you. Being held against his solid warmth, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, Isadora let herself relax into the moment. This was what she'd been denying herself, the simple pleasure of being desired by a man who saw her as more than just a vessel for someone else's child. Dimitri, she whispered, his name a prayer on her lips. I know, he replied, his arms tightening around her. I feel it too. When the song ended, they remained locked together, swaying slightly, lost in awareness that had been building for weeks. Other diners, other conversations, the entire world beyond their embrace ceased to exist. I should get back, Isadora said finally, though every cell protested the words. Should you? His hands slid to her hips, holding her against him so she could feel his arousal. Or should you let me take you somewhere we can be alone? The invitation was clear, loaded with promise and want, and the possibility of crossing every line they'd carefully drawn. Isadora looked up into his eyes and saw her own need reflected there, magnified by weeks of proximity and denial. Yes, she breathed, before rational thought could intervene. Dimitri's suite at the city's most exclusive hotel was designed for seduction, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views, a king-sized bed that dominated the space like an altar to pleasure. But it was the way Dimitri looked at her, with reverence and hunger and something deeper than desire, that made Isadora feel like the most beautiful woman alive. Are you sure? He asked, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. Because once we do this, everything changes. Everything already has changed, she replied, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. The question is whether we're brave enough to admit it. His response was immediate and overwhelming. His mouth claimed hers with desperate hunger, while his hands tangled in her hair, holding her exactly where he wanted her. She melted against him, all pretense dissolving in the heat of finally giving in to what they both needed. I've wanted you since that first night, he confessed against her throat, finding the sensitive spot that made her knees weak. Watching you care for my daughter, seeing your strength and gentleness. It drove me half insane trying to keep my hands off you. His words sent liquid fire through her veins. She arched against him, seeking friction, seeking relief from the ache that had been building for weeks. Show me, she whispered, her hands working at the buttons of his shirt. Show me how much you want me. The emerald dress slipped from her shoulders like water, pooling at her feet to reveal matching lingerie she'd chosen with deliberate intent. Dimitri's sharp intake of breath was gratifying, but it was the way his hands shook as he traced her curves that made her feel truly powerful. Beautiful, he murmured, his palms skimming over her ribs, her waist, the flare of her hips. So incredibly beautiful. When his mouth found her breast through the lace of her bra, she cried out at the contact. Her nipples were still sensitive from nursing, and his tongue sent shockwaves through her entire system. Please, she gasped, not even sure what she was begging for. He seemed to understand anyway. With reverent efficiency, he removed the last barriers between them, worshipping her body with hands and mouth until she was trembling with need. I want to taste you, he said, his voice rough with desire. I want to make you come apart with my tongue. The crude words from his cultured lips sent pure lust straight to her core. She could only nod as he lifted her onto the bed and settled between her thighs with predatory grace. The first touch of his mouth against her most intimate flesh made her arch off the bed with a cry that was part pleasure, part prayer. He was thorough and relentless, using lips and tongue until she was writhing beneath him, chasing release that danced just beyond reach. That's it, he encouraged, his breath hot against her sensitive skin. Let go for me, beautiful. Let me watch you fall apart. When the climax finally crashed over her, It was with intensity that left her shaking and gasping his name. But he didn't give her time to recover before he was moving up her body, settling between her thighs with the blunt head of his arousal pressing against her entrance. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice strained with restraint. "I want to see your eyes when I claim you." Their gazes locked as he pushed forward, filling her completely, and Isadora felt something fundamental shift in her chest. This wasn't just physical release. This was connection, recognition, the moment when two wounded souls discovered they could heal each other. "Mine," Dimitri whispered fiercely, his hips beginning to move in a rhythm that drove rational thought from her mind. "Say it, Isadora. Say you're mine." "Yours," she gasped, her nails raking down his back as he drove deeper, harder, pushing her toward another peak. "God, yes, I'm yours." The words seemed to unleash something primal in him. His movements became more demanding, more possessive, claiming her with thoroughness that left no doubt about his intentions. She met him thrust for thrust, her body opening completely, taking everything he had to give. When her second climax hit, it pulled him over the edge with her. He buried his face in her neck with a hoarse cry, his body shuddering as he found release deep inside her. They lay tangled together afterward, sweat slicked and breathing hard, the magnitude of what had just happened settling around them. "No going back now," Dimitri said finally, his arms tightening around her. "No," Isadora agreed, pressing a soft kiss to his chest. "No going back." They returned to the penthouse as dawn painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, both acutely aware that everything had changed between them. The careful professional distance they'd maintained was gone, replaced by something deeper and infinitely more complicated. Helena was asleep on the living room couch when they entered, Serafina's baby monitor on the coffee table beside her. She stirred as they approached, her knowing smile making it clear she understood exactly what had transpired. "She was perfect," Helena whispered, gathering her purse. "Fed at midnight and 3 a.m., slept peacefully between. You two look." She paused, studying their faces with sisterly intuition. "Happy." Finally, after Helena left, Dimitri and Isadora stood in the quiet penthouse, suddenly uncertain how to navigate their new reality. "I should check on her," Isadora said, gesturing toward the nursery. "We should check on her," Dimitri corrected, the possessive pronoun carrying weight neither was ready to examine fully. Serafina was awake but content, lying in her crib making soft baby sounds as she studied the mobile rotating above her. When she saw them enter together, her face lit up with the kind of pure joy that made hearts melt. "She knows," Dimitri said quietly, reaching down to stroke his daughter's cheek. "She can sense that something's changed." "Babies are intuitive about emotional connections," Isadora replied, though she felt the truth of his words. Serafina did seem happier, more settled, as if she could feel the love growing between the adults in her life. "Is this what we're doing?" Dimitri asked, turning to face her fully. "Are we really going to try to make this work?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications about future and family and the possibility of building something lasting from shared grief and unexpected love. "I don't know how to be anything other than all in," Isadora admitted. "When I love someone, I love completely. But that scares me, because complete love means complete vulnerability." "I understand that fear," Dimitri said, moving closer until he could cup her face in his hands. "I felt it when Elena died, when I thought I might lose Serafina too. But loving you doesn't feel like a risk. It feels like coming home." The words broke through the last of her defenses. Rising on her toes, she kissed him with all the emotion she couldn't yet put into words, pouring her heart into the contact. When they broke apart, Serafina was watching them with wide eyes, as if she approved of this new development in her small world. "So we're really doing this?" Isadora asked. "We're going to see where this leads. We're going to build something beautiful," Dimitri replied, his voice certain. "All three of us, together." The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Days were spent caring for Serafina, who thrived under their combined attention. She was gaining weight rapidly, hitting developmental milestones, becoming the happy, healthy baby she was meant to be. Evenings belonged to Dimitri and Isadora, exploring their connection through long conversations, shared meals, and passionate encounters that left them both breathless. But they were careful to keep their relationship private. In public, Isadora was still presented as Serafina's caregiver, nothing more. The deception felt necessary, protective of the fragile happiness they were building. Until the night everything threatened to fall apart. "I want you to come with me tonight," Dimitri said over breakfast, his tone casual but his eyes intense. "The hospital is hosting a charity gala for the children's wing. I'm giving the keynote speech about Serafina's recovery. Isadora nearly choked on her coffee. As your date? As my partner, he corrected. It's time people knew how important you are to our family. The word partner sent butterflies through her chest, but also terror. Dimitri, your social circle isn't ready for this. The questions, the assumptions. Let them make assumptions. I'm tired of hiding what we mean to each other. He reached across to take her hand. Besides, it's a medical charity event. Your nursing background makes you the perfect companion. That evening, as Isadora stood before her closet in a floor-length navy gown that clung to her curves like liquid silk, she tried to calm her racing heart. This would be her first public appearance as anything more than an employee in Dimitri's life. The gala was held in the ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast elegant light over hundreds of guests in formal wear, the city's medical and social elite mingling over champagne and conversation. Dimitri looked devastating in his tuxedo, every inch the powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms and built empires. But it was the way he looked at her, with pride and possession and something deeper, that made her feel like she belonged by his side. Dr. Richardson, I'd like you to meet Isadora Moreau, Dimitri said, introducing her to the hospital's chief of staff. She's the pediatric nurse who saved Serafina's life. Ah yes, the wet nurse arrangement, Dr. Richardson replied, his tone carefully neutral but his eyes calculating. Quite unconventional. The phrase wet nurse hit like a slap. Isadora felt heat rise in her cheeks as nearby conversations quieted, ears perking up at the hint of scandal. Isadora is a highly trained pediatric specialist, Dimitri said, his voice carrying an edge of warning. Her expertise and dedication brought my daughter back from the brink of death when conventional medicine failed, but the damage was done. Words spread through the elegant crowd like wildfire, whispered conversations following in their wake. Isadora caught fragments of speculation, judgment, assumptions about her motivations and their relationship. Quite exotic, isn't she? She heard one woman murmur to her companion, I suppose money can buy anything these days, even maternal instinct. The casual cruelty of the comment hit harder than any direct insult. Isadora excused herself to the ladies' room, needing a moment to compose herself before she said something that would make things worse. She was touching up her lipstick when Margaret Blackwood, wife of the city's most prominent surgeon, cornered her with predatory grace. You're even prettier than the photos suggest, Margaret said, her smile sharp as a blade. Tell me, how does it feel to know everyone's talking about how you seduced a grieving widower through his helpless infant? I beg your pardon? Isadora's voice was dangerously quiet. Oh please, we're all adults here. A beautiful young woman, a vulnerable man, a baby who conveniently couldn't survive without your unique services. Margaret's laugh was like ice. It's quite clever, really. What man could resist a woman who literally gave life to his child? Before Isadora could respond, the restroom door opened and another woman entered. Helena, Dimitri's sister, her expression thunderous. Margaret, Helena said sweetly, I didn't realize the charity had started accepting donations of pure venom this year. Margaret's face flushed red. Helena, You were just leaving, Helena interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. And if I hear you spreading poison about my brother's happiness again, you'll find yourself permanently uninvited from every social event in this city. After Margaret fled, Helena turned to Isadora with genuine warmth. Don't let the vultures get to you. They're just jealous that my brother found love again. Did he? Isadora asked quietly. Find love? Or did he just find a convenient solution to his daughter's medical needs? Helena studied her with shrewd eyes. What do you think? Before Isadora could answer, Dimitri appeared in the doorway, his face dark with anger. I've been looking for you. Are you all right? Someone said Margaret Blackwood was causing trouble. I'm fine, Isadora lied, though her heart was breaking. Maybe we should go. The next morning brought a new nightmare. Photos from the gala had appeared on several social media accounts showing Dimitri and Isadora dancing, his arms around her, both looking blissfully happy. The comments were brutal. Gold Digger Spotted read one caption. Billionaire CEO caught in honey trap by baby's nurse. She's using that poor baby to trap a rich man, wrote another. Disgusting. How desperate do you have to be to seduce a man through his sick child? Each comment was like a knife to the heart. Isadora sat in the nursery, tears streaming down her face as she fed Serafina, who seemed to sense her distress and kept looking up with worried eyes. They're wrong, Dimitri said from the doorway, his voice fierce with protective anger. Every single person saying these things is wrong, and they know it. Are they? Isadora asked, not looking up from his daughter. Maybe I did manipulate the situation. Maybe I saw an opportunity and took it. Stop. Dimitri knelt beside her chair, forcing her to meet his eyes. You saved my daughter's life with no thought of personal gain. You gave her everything she needed to survive, including love you thought you'd never feel again after losing Celeste. But now people will always wonder, she whispered. They'll always question my motives, your judgment. What kind of life is that for Serafina? A life filled with love, Dimitri said firmly. A life where she grows up knowing her parents chose each other and chose her, despite what anyone else thought. Parents. The word sent a flutter through her chest, but also terror. Was that what she was becoming? Serafina's mother in more than just function? I think I should go, she said suddenly, the words tearing from her throat. Find another arrangement for Serafina's care. Let you move on with someone more appropriate. Dimitri's face went white. You're letting them win. You're letting their jealousy and small-mindedness destroy what we've built. What if they're right? What if I am just a convenient solution wrapped in emotional manipulation? Then explain this, Dimitri said, pulling out his phone to show her a video that made her heart stop. It was security footage from the hospital, from that first night when she'd found Serafina crying inconsolably. The timestamp showed she'd tried everything else first, checking the baby's diaper, taking her temperature, attempting to comfort her with rocking and singing. Only after 40 minutes of desperate attempts had she made the decision to nurse her. You see that? Dimitri's voice was rough with emotion. That's a woman putting a child's needs above everything else, including her own professional security. That's not manipulation. That's love. The video broke through her defenses, reminding her of the truth she'd been letting others obscure. She hadn't set out to seduce anyone. She'd simply responded to a baby's desperate need with the only thing she had to give. I love you, Dimitri continued, his hands framing her face. Not because you saved my daughter, but because of who you are, your strength, your compassion, your capacity to love completely despite your own losses. Don't let their poison convince you otherwise. But even as she wanted to believe him, the seed of doubt had been planted. In a world that would always question her motives, how could she be sure of them herself? Hello, my beautiful family. If you are still here with me, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, because what happens next will put you at the edge of your seat. Now, let's continue. 3 weeks after the gala disaster, Dimitri made a decision that would change everything. He'd watched Isadora withdraw, seen the way cruel whispers had dimmed the light in her eyes, and he was done letting other people's opinions dictate their happiness. I need you to come with me somewhere, he said that morning, his tone broking no argument. Dimitri, I don't think we should be seen in public right now. Trust me, he interrupted, already reaching for Serafina's diaper bag. Both of you, trust me. The drive through the city was tense, Isadora clearly uncomfortable with whatever he had planned. But when they pulled up to St. Catherine's Hospital, she looked genuinely confused. Why are we here? Because this is where our story began, Dimitri said simply, lifting Serafina from her car seat. This is where 3 broken hearts found each other and started healing. He led them to the same pediatric wing where they'd first met, though this time they were visitors rather than patients. The night shift nurses recognized them immediately, their faces lighting up with genuine joy at seeing Serafina healthy and thriving. Look at this beautiful girl, exclaimed Nurse Patricia, who had been working the night Isadora first fed Serafina. She's grown so much. It's all thanks to Isadora, Dimitri said, his arm sliding around her waist with casual possessiveness. She gave Serafina everything she needed to survive. They made their way to the family consultation room where so many difficult conversations had taken place during Serafina's illness. But now, instead of medical equipment and sterile chairs, the room held something that made Isadora's breath catch. White roses everywhere, hundreds of them, filling the space with beauty and the sweet scent of new beginnings. In the center, a small table held champagne and what was unmistakably a jewelry box. Dimitri, she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. 4 months ago, I came to this hospital convinced I was about to lose everything, he said, taking her hands in his. My daughter was dying, my world was falling apart, and I had no hope left. Serafina gurgled contentedly in her carrier, as if she understood the importance of the moment. Then I found you, Dimitri continued, his voice rough with emotion. Not just feeding my daughter, but loving her, giving her life when medicine had failed. And in saving her, you saved me too. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that took her breath away. The center stone was a flawless emerald surrounded by diamonds, the setting classic but unique, clearly chosen specifically for her. "I know what people say about us," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know they question your motives, my judgment, the appropriateness of our relationship. But I don't care what they think, because I know the truth." Tears were streaming down her face now, though she couldn't say if they were from joy or terror. "The truth is that you are the most selfless, compassionate, strongest woman I've ever known. The truth is that I love you not because of what you've done for Serafina, but because of who you are. The truth is that she needs a mother, and you're already hers in every way that matters." He held up the ring, his hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Marry me, Isadora, not to silence the gossips or legitimize our relationship, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Because Serafina deserves parents who choose each other every single day. Because you and I together are stronger than any judgment they can throw at us." The silence stretched between them, loaded with possibility and fear and hope. Around them, the white roses seemed to hold their breath, waiting for her answer. "Yes," she whispered, the word barely audible but carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Yes, I'll marry you." Dimitri's smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, the emerald catching the light like captured fire. When he stood to kiss her, it was with the kind of passion that made promises about their future. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "Both of you. My girls." From her carrier, Serafina made a sound that could have been approval, making them both laugh through their tears. "When?" Isadora asked, studying the ring that somehow fit perfectly. "Soon," Dimitri replied. "I don't want to give doubt time to creep in. Don't want to let the vultures circle any longer than necessary." "What about your family, your business associates?" "The people who matter will be happy for us. The ones who aren't don't deserve a place in our lives." His voice carried the confidence of a man who had made his choice and would defend it against all comers. Planning a wedding while under social media scrutiny proved more challenging than either of them had anticipated. Every vendor they contacted seemed to have an opinion about their relationship, and several high-end venues suddenly became unavailable when they learned the identity of the bride. "The Rosewood Hotel regrets to inform you that they've had a cancellation conflict," Helena reported after their third rejection, which is code for, "We don't want the drama your wedding might bring." "Cowards," Dimitri said flatly. "All of them." They were sitting in his study, wedding planning books scattered across his desk, Serafina napping peacefully in her portable crib nearby. The baby had become an integral part of all their discussions about the future, not just as Dimitri's daughter, but as their daughter, the child who would bind them together as a family. "Maybe we should consider something smaller," Isadora suggested. "More intimate. Just close family and friends." "You deserve better than a courthouse ceremony," Dimitri replied immediately. "You deserve the wedding of your dreams." "My dreams changed," she said softly, reaching across to take his hand. "I used to dream about a big wedding with hundreds of guests and elaborate decorations. But now I just dream about standing up in front of the people who love us and promising to be your wife." The simple honesty in her words made his chest tight with emotion. This woman, who could have demanded anything, wanted only the promise of their love made public and permanent. "Then let's do that," he said, bringing her hand to his lips. Small, intimate, perfect. They decided on a ceremony in the penthouse garden, under the open sky with the city spread out below them. Helena would handle the details, keeping the guest list to immediate family and the few friends who had supported their relationship from the beginning. But even their scaled-down plans faced obstacles. Isadora's ex-husband Laurent somehow learned about the engagement and called repeatedly, alternating between congratulations that sounded like threats and demands to know if she was using that baby to trap another rich man. "He's just jealous," Helena said after Isadora recounted the latest unpleasant conversation. "You've found happiness he tried to destroy and he can't stand it." "What if he's right, though?" Isadora asked quietly. "What if I am using Serafina to secure a future I could never achieve on my own?" "Then explain why you're not asking for a prenup," Dimitri said from the doorway, making both women turn. "Explain why you insisted on keeping your own bank account and continuing to work part-time at the hospital. Explain why you donate half your salary to the Children's Wing charity." He moved to sit beside her, pulling her close against his side. Gold diggers don't typically refuse expensive gifts or maintain their financial independence. They don't volunteer their time helping other families in crisis. I need to know that what we have is real," she admitted. "That if everything else disappeared tomorrow, we'd still choose each other." "We would," Dimitri said with absolute certainty. We chose each other when you had nothing to offer but love for my daughter. We chose each other when the world was telling us we were wrong. We'll keep choosing each other long after the gossips find someone else to tear down." 2 weeks before the wedding, they received an unexpected gift that silenced many of their critics. Dr. Morrison, Serafina's original physician, published an article in the Journal of Pediatric Medicine about unconventional feeding solutions for failure-to-thrive infants. The article detailed Serafina's case without identifying her specifically, but anyone in their social circle would recognize the story. Ms. M's intervention was not only medically sound but life-saving, the article concluded. Her willingness to provide lactation support to an infant in crisis, despite personal and professional risks, represents the highest ideals of nursing care. The infant's complete recovery and continued thriving is testament to both the intervention's efficacy and the caregiver's expertise. The article changed everything. Medical professionals began reaching out to congratulate them instead of questioning their methods. Several nursing journals requested interviews about innovative infant care. The narrative shifted from scandal to success story. "You see," Dimitri said, showing her the article as they sat in the nursery watching Serafina play with her toys. "The truth always comes out eventually." But even as their reputation rehabilitated in professional circles, Isadora knew the personal attacks would never fully stop. There would always be people who looked at their interracial family and found reasons to disapprove, who questioned her motives or his judgment. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, looking at the man she loved and the baby who had become her daughter in every way that mattered, she felt only fierce protectiveness. Let them talk. Let them judge. She had found her family, and she would defend it with everything she had. 2 weeks, she said, holding up her left hand to admire the emerald ring that caught the afternoon light. 2 weeks until I become Mrs. Voss. 2 weeks until we make it official, Dimitri corrected, leaning over to kiss her temple. You've been mine since that first night in the hospital. The wedding is just letting everyone else know. The morning of their wedding dawned clear and bright, the October air crisp with the promise of autumn. But inside the penthouse, tension crackled like electricity as final preparations took place. "I can't find the rings," Helena announced, panic creeping into her usually composed voice. "I put them in the safe last night, but they're not there now." "Check the jewelry box in my bedroom," Dimitri called from the bathroom, where he was struggling with his bow tie. "I moved them there for safekeeping." Isadora sat in her dressing room, staring at her reflection while her makeup artist put finishing touches on her look. The woman in the mirror looked radiant, her skin glowing, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon, the vintage lace dress fitting her curves like it had been designed specifically for her body. But inside, her stomach churned with a mixture of excitement and terror. "You look beautiful," said Maria, the makeup artist. "That glow, it's not just good makeup. You're radiant from the inside out." "I'm terrified," Isadora admitted quietly. "What if I'm making the biggest mistake of my life?" "Are you in love with him?" Maria asked, meeting her eyes in the mirror. Desperately. "Does he love you back?" "I think so. I hope so." "Then you're not making a mistake. You're making a choice to be brave." Through the window, Isadora could see the garden being transformed into a wedding venue. White chairs arranged in neat rows, an arch covered in roses and greenery, string lights twinkling even in the daylight. It was intimate and elegant, and everything she had dreamed of. So why did she feel like running? A soft knock on the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Helena with some last-minute detail. Instead, Dimitri stepped inside, devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, his expression serious. "You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony," she protested weakly. "Traditional rules don't seem to apply to us," he replied, moving closer until he could take her hands. "Helena told me you seem nervous. Talk to me. What if we're moving too fast? What if this is all just grief and proximity and shared trauma making us think we're in love?" Dimitri studied her face with the intensity that had first captured her attention. "Do you remember what you told me that first night? About your body still producing milk, because grief makes us hold on to hope longer than our minds want to?" She nodded, confused by the direction of his thoughts. "Maybe that's what this is," he continued. "Maybe love is just another form of hope. Hope that we don't have to face the world alone. Hope that two broken people can heal each other. Hope that families can be built from choice as well as blood." His words broke through her panic, reminding her of why she had said yes in the first place. Not because it was practical or expected, but because loving him felt like coming home. "Are you ready to hope with me?" he asked, his thumb tracing over her engagement ring. "Yes," she whispered, the word carrying absolute certainty. "I'm ready." He kissed her forehead gently, careful not to disturb her makeup. "Good. Because our daughter is getting restless, and Helena is about to have a nervous breakdown if we don't start this ceremony soon." The garden had been transformed into something magical. White roses and greenery created an arch that framed the city skyline, while string lights added warmth to the crisp afternoon air. The guest list was small but meaningful. Helena and her husband, Dimitri's business partner and closest friend, Dr. Morrison, and several nurses from the hospital, and Isadora's sister who had flown in from Montreal. But the most important guest was Serafina, dressed in a tiny white dress and seated in a decorated wagon that Helena would pull down the aisle as their flower girl. "Ladies and gentlemen," the officiant began, "we gather today to witness the union of two hearts that found each other in the most unexpected circumstances and chose love over fear, hope over despair, family over convention." The ceremony was simple but profound. When it came time for vows, Dimitri spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "Isadora, when I met you, I was a man who had forgotten how to hope. You didn't just save my daughter's life. You reminded me that love doesn't always come in the forms we expect. You showed me that families can be built from choice, that strength comes from vulnerability, and that sometimes the most profound love grows from shared loss." He paused, looking down at Serafina, who was babbling happily in her wagon. "I promise to love you not just as my wife, but as Serafina's mother, as my partner in building something beautiful from the ashes of our grief. I promise to defend our family against anyone who questions our right to happiness. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life." When it was Isadora's turn, she looked out at the small gathering of people who had supported their unconventional love story, then back at the man who had given her a reason to hope again. "Dimitri, when I lost my daughter, I thought I had lost everything. I thought my capacity for maternal love would die with her, that I would never again feel the purpose that comes from nurturing life. Then I found Serafina crying in that hospital room, and my body responded before my mind could interfere." She reached down to stroke Serafina's cheek, the baby looking up at her with adoring eyes. "But it wasn't just my body that responded, it was my heart. In caring for your daughter, I found my way back to myself. In loving her, I learned to love again. And in loving you both, I discovered that families aren't just born, they're chosen, they're built, they're defended." Her voice grew stronger, more certain. "I promise to be the mother Serafina deserves, the wife you need, the partner who will stand beside you against whatever challenges come our way. I promise to love fiercely, protect fearlessly, and choose hope over fear every single day." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was tender but intense, sealing promises that had been building for months. The small crowd erupted in cheers, but all Isadora could hear was Serafina's delighted laughter as Helena lifted her from the wagon to join the celebration. The reception was held on the penthouse terrace, overlooking the city that had witnessed their love story unfold. Tables adorned with white roses and candles created intimate spaces for conversation, while a small dance floor invited celebration under the stars. To Dimitri and Isadora, Helena raised her champagne glass during the toast portion of the evening, who proved that love doesn't always follow conventional rules, but when it's real, it's worth fighting for. Dr. Morrison stood next, his expression serious but warm. "As a physician, I've seen many families face crisis. Most break under the pressure. But you two didn't just survive, you transformed crisis into opportunity, tragedy into triumph. Serafina is thriving not just because of innovative medical care, but because she's surrounded by love that chose her before biology ever could." The dancing began with their first dance as husband and wife, swaying together to music that seemed to capture the essence of their journey. Serafina watched from Helena's arms, clapping her hands with baby enthusiasm whenever the music swelled. "No regrets?" Dimitri asked as they moved together, lost in their own world, despite the other couples joining them on the dance floor. "Only that we waited so long to admit what we both knew from the beginning," Isadora replied, her arms tightening around his neck. "And what's that?" "That some things are worth fighting for. That love doesn't always look the way we expect it to, but when it's real, it changes everything." As the evening progressed, Isadora found herself watching their guests with wonder. These people, chosen family, professional colleagues who had become friends, supporters who had seen past social convention to the truth of their love, represented the community they had built around their unconventional beginning. But it was when Helena approached with Serafina, clearly tired from the excitement but fighting sleep, that the full magnitude of what they had accomplished hit her. "Someone wants her mama," Helena said, passing the baby to Isadora with the casual assumption that had become second nature to their extended family. Mama. The word sent warmth flooding through her chest. Not just caregiver or nurse or even stepmother, but Mama. The title she had thought died with Celeste, reclaimed through love that transcended biology. Dance with your daughter, Dimitri suggested, his voice rough with emotion at witnessing the moment. So Isadora swayed on the dance floor with Serafina in her arms, humming the same lullaby she had sung that first night in the hospital. Around them, their wedding guests continued celebrating, but in that moment, it felt like the three of them existed in their own perfect bubble of contentment. We did it, she whispered to the baby, who was finally surrendering to sleep. We became a family. The reception was winding down, guests beginning to say their goodbyes, when Helena approached with an expression that made Isadora's blood run cold. This was delivered to the front desk, Helena said quietly, holding out an envelope addressed in block letters to the happy couple. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message that made Isadora's knees weak. Congratulations on your fairy tale wedding. But fairy tales aren't real, are they? Ask your new wife about the research she did on your family before she ever applied to work at St. Catherine's. Ask her about the photos she studied of your late wife and daughter. Ask her how she knew exactly what your family needed before she ever stepped foot in that hospital room. True love is beautiful. Calculated manipulation is not. A friend. The words hit like physical blows. Around them, the celebration continued, but Isadora felt like the world had stopped spinning. This is ridiculous, Dimitri said after reading the letter, his voice tight with anger. Someone's trying to destroy our happiness with lies. But even as he spoke, Isadora could see doubt creeping into his eyes. The letter had been crafted to exploit every insecurity, every question that had been raised about their relationship. Show me, she said quietly. What? Show me your phone. Look up my employment application at the hospital. Check when I applied versus when I started working in pediatrics. Dimitri stared at her like she'd lost her mind. I'm not going to investigate my own wife based on an anonymous letter. But you want to, she said, reading the conflict in his expression. Part of you is wondering if there's truth in this, if I somehow manipulated everything from the beginning. The accusation hung between them like poison. Their remaining guests were starting to notice the tension, conversations quieting as they sensed drama unfolding. I applied to work at St. Catherine's 6 months before Serafina was born, Isadora said, her voice carrying to everyone present. I specialized in pediatric care because I had lost my own daughter and wanted to help other families avoid that pain. I never researched your family, never studied photos of your wife, never calculated anything. She turned to address their guest directly, her chin raised despite the tears streaming down her face. But since someone wants to question my motives publicly, let's address this publicly. Yes, I was in the right place at the right time when Serafina needed help. Yes, I had milk available because my body was still mourning my daughter. Yes, I fell in love with a man while caring for his child. Her voice grew stronger, more defiant. If that makes me a manipulator, then I accept the label. If loving a dying baby back to health makes me calculating, then I'm guilty as charged. If finding hope again in the arms of a man who understood my grief makes me a gold digger, then so be it. She pulled off her wedding ring and held it up for everyone to see. But I won't stay where my love is questioned, where my motives are suspect, where anonymous cowards can poison the happiness we've built with accusations and doubt. Isadora, stop, Dimitri said, reaching for her. No. She stepped back, her voice breaking. You deserve better than wondering if your wife truly loves you or just sees you as a meal ticket. Serafina deserves better than growing up with questions about whether her mother chose her or used her. But before Isadora could leave, Dr. Morrison stepped forward, his expression thunderous. Enough, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life and death decisions. I have listened to this character assassination long enough. He turned to address the gathered guests, his tone that of a man presenting medical evidence. I was Serafina's attending physician during her crisis. I witnessed Isadora's initial intervention, and I can tell you that no amount of premeditation could have prepared someone for what happened that night. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through what appeared to be medical records. Serafina's condition deteriorated rapidly and unpredictably. She was stable during the day shift but crashed after midnight when staffing was minimal. The decision to nurse her was made in a moment of crisis, not calculation. Dr. Morrison looked directly at Isadora, his expression kind but firm. Furthermore, I've reviewed your employment records. You applied for a position in pediatric oncology, not neonatal intensive care. You were reassigned to NICU because of a staffing shortage, not by choice. The idea that you somehow engineered this situation is medically and logically impossible. A murmur ran through the remaining guests as the doctor's testimony dismantled the anonymous accusations piece by piece. But more importantly, Dr. Morrison continued, I've watched this family for months. I've seen Isadora refuse gifts, decline opportunities for personal advancement, and consistently put Serafina's needs above her own comfort. That's not the behavior of a manipulator. It's the behavior of a mother. Helena stepped forward next, her voice sharp with protective anger. I've watched my brother grieve for 2 years. I've seen him reject every woman who approached him, every attempt at matchmaking, every suggestion that he should move on. The idea that he could be manipulated into marriage is laughable to anyone who actually knows him. She turned to face the crowd, her chin raised defiantly. What I've seen is two people who found each other in the darkest moment of their lives and chose to build something beautiful together. What I've seen is my niece thriving under the care of a woman who loves her completely. What I've seen is real love, the kind that doesn't need to justify itself to anyone. But it was Serafina herself who provided the most powerful testimony. The baby, awakened by the raised voices, began crying in the way that had become familiar to everyone present, not the inconsolable wailing of her early illness, but the normal fussing of a tired child. Without thinking, Isadora moved toward the sound, her body responding to Serafina's need with automatic maternal instinct. She lifted the baby from Helena's arms, and Serafina immediately quieted, nestling against her with complete trust. That, said Dr. Morrison quietly, is not manipulation. That's love, pure, instinctive, maternal love. As the guests began to disperse, mollified by the medical testimony and obvious bond between Isadora and Serafina, Helena made a discovery that changed everything. I know who sent this, she announced, holding up the anonymous letter and a hotel business card that had been tucked behind it. Laurent Dubois, registered at the Marriott downtown, arrived this morning. My ex-husband, Isadora said, her voice flat with resignation. I should have known. Why would he do this? Dimitri asked, his arm tightening protectively around his wife. Because he can't stand that I found happiness after he tried to destroy me, Isadora replied. Because seeing me succeed makes his own failures more obvious. But when they called the hotel to confront Laurent, they discovered something that shocked everyone present. Mr. Dubois checked out an hour ago, the desk clerk reported. But he left a package for Mrs. Voss. The package contained documents that made Isadora's world tilt off its axis. Genealogy records, marriage certificates, birth records spanning generations. What is this? She whispered, staring at names and dates that seemed familiar but impossible. Helena, who had been studying the papers over her shoulder, suddenly went white. Elena Moreau, she read aloud. Born in Montreal to Pierre and Celeste Moreau. That's impossible, Isadora breathed. Elena was your sister-in-law. She was your cousin, Dimitri said quietly, understanding dawning in his voice. Elena's maiden name was Moreau. Her grandparents emigrated from Haiti to Montreal in the 1950s. The revelation hit like lightning. Elena, Dimitri's beloved first wife, had been Isadora's distant cousin. The woman whose death had left Serafina motherless, whose husband had been consumed by grief, whose child had needed exactly what Isadora could provide. This can't be coincidence, Helena whispered, studying the family trees that showed the connection spanning 3 generations. It's not coincidence, said a voice from the terrace doorway. Laurent Dubois stood there, his expression a mixture of triumph and jealousy. It's destiny. And it's exactly what I told her it was when she started obsessing over her dead cousin's family. You're lying, Dimitri snarled, moving to place himself between Laurent and Isadora. Am I? Ask her about the newspaper clippings she collected about your wife's accident. Ask her about the photos she kept of your family. Ask her why she really applied to work at that specific hospital. Isadora felt the world spinning around her as Laurent's accusations hit home. Because there was truth in them. Twisted, poisoned truth, but truth nonetheless. I did research Elena's family after she died, she admitted quietly, her voice barely audible. When I found out we were related, I was curious about the cousin I'd never met. I looked up articles about the accident, saw photos of you and Serafina. Dimitri went very still beside her. But I never connected it to working at the hospital, she continued desperately. I applied there because it was the best pediatric facility in the city, not because of any connection to your family. Really? Laurent's smile was vicious. Then, explain why you kept a photo of Serafina on your refrigerator months before you ever met her. Explain why you told your grief counselor that you felt called to help your cousin's family after Elena died. The words hit like physical blows because they were true. Isadora had felt drawn to Elena's story, had felt a connection to the cousin she'd never known who had left behind a husband and baby. She had kept a newspaper photo of the accident, had wondered about the family Elena had left behind, but she had never, ever planned what happened in that hospital room. You see, Laurent continued, addressing Dimitri directly. She orchestrated all of this, the job at the hospital, the convenient lactation, the vulnerable baby who needed exactly what she could provide. It's the perfect The silence that followed was deafening. Isadora could feel the doubt radiating from everyone present, could see the questions forming in Dimitri's eyes. Is it true? He asked quietly. Did you know who Serafina was before you found her that night? The question broke her heart because she could see in his expression that part of him already believed Laurent's version of events. I knew Elena was my cousin, she whispered. I knew she had died in an accident and left behind a husband and baby, but I never connected that knowledge to Serafina until much later, until after I had already fallen in love with both of you. Convenient timing, Laurent sneered. No, Isadora said, her voice growing stronger. True timing. The kind of timing that happens when the universe decides to heal multiple hearts through a single act of love. She turned to face Dimitri fully, her eyes blazing with conviction. You want to know the real truth? Elena's spirit led me to that hospital room. Her love for you and Serafina guided my body to produce exactly what her daughter needed to survive. Her blessing brought us together because she knew you both needed what I could give. The words rang with such conviction that even Laurent seemed taken aback. Call it destiny, call it divine intervention, call it the most elaborate manipulation in history. I don't care, Isadora continued. What matters is that Serafina is alive and thriving. What matters is that you found love again. What matters is that I discovered motherhood isn't limited by biology. She looked around at their guests, these people who had witnessed their journey from the beginning. Elena brought us together through her death, just as surely as she brought Serafina into the world through her life. The only question is whether you're brave enough to accept that kind of love, that kind of cosmic connection, or whether you're going to let a bitter man poison the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to all three of us. The challenge hung in the air like a prayer, waiting for Dimitri's response. The morning sun streamed through the nursery windows as Isadora sat in the rocking chair, watching Serafina take her first tentative steps between the coffee table and the couch. At 10 months old, the baby was thriving beyond anyone's wildest expectations, chubby-cheeked, bright-eyed, and absolutely fearless in her exploration of the world. She's going to be walking before her first birthday, Dimitri observed from the doorway, his voice filled with wonder and pride. She's determined to keep up with the bigger kids at daycare, Isadora replied, opening her arms as Serafina toddled toward her with a triumphant giggle. 6 months had passed since their wedding day confrontation with Laurent. 6 months since the revelation about Elena's family connection. The initial shock had given way to acceptance, then to something deeper, a sense that they were exactly where they were meant to be. Any regrets? Dimitri asked, settling into the chair beside hers, the same question he'd asked on their wedding night. Only that Elena never got to see how beautiful her daughter would become, Isadora replied, smoothing Serafina's dark curls. I think she would have been proud. It had taken weeks of therapy and long conversations for them to process the cosmic coincidence that had brought them together. Dr. Sarah Chen, their counselor, had helped them separate Laurent's poisonous accusations from the truth of their connection. Synchronicity, she had called it. The meaningful coincidence that occurs when the universe aligns to heal multiple wounds through a single intervention. Whether it was destiny, divine intervention, or simply extraordinary luck, they had chosen to view Elena's family connection as a blessing rather than a burden. Serafina would grow up knowing she had been loved by two mothers, the one who gave her life and the one who saved it. The adoption papers had been finalized 3 months ago, making Isadora officially Serafina's legal mother. The ceremony had been small and private, but the emotion had been overwhelming. Holding the documents that legally recognized what their hearts had known from the beginning, Isadora had finally felt complete. Mama. Up, Serafina demanded, using the word that never failed to make Isadora's heart flutter with joy. Always, Isadora replied, lifting the baby into her arms. Mama will always pick you up. Are you ready for this? Dimitri asked as they pulled into the parking lot of St. Catherine's Hospital. As ready as I'll ever be, Isadora replied, checking her appearance in the visor mirror. Today marked the launch of the Serafina Voss Foundation for Premature Infant Care, funded by Dimitri's pharmaceutical company and administered through the hospital's pediatric wing. They had decided to make their first public appearance as a family since the wedding, knowing that media attention was inevitable, but feeling strong enough now to handle whatever came their way. The press conference was held in the same conference room where they had received so many devastating updates about Serafina's condition during her illness. But today, the room was filled with hope instead of despair. The Serafina Voss Foundation will provide lactation support services to families facing feeding challenges with premature or medically fragile infants, Dimitri announced to the assembled reporters and medical professionals. Our goal is to ensure that no baby suffers from failure to thrive when innovative feeding solutions are available. Dr. Morrison stood to add his support. Research has shown that human milk is often the most effective treatment for babies who cannot tolerate artificial nutrition. This foundation will provide both the medical support and the donor milk needed to save lives. But it was when Isadora took the podium, Serafina contentedly playing with her jewelry, that the real message became clear. 6 months ago, I was a woman whose milk had no baby to nourish, she said, her voice strong and clear. Today, I'm the mother of a thriving child and the advocate for other families facing similar crises. She paused, looking out at the audience that included many of the nurses who had supported their unconventional arrangement. Love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Families aren't always built through traditional means, but when a child needs something and an adult can provide it, magic happens. Our foundation exists to facilitate that magic for other families. The questions from reporters were respectful, focused on the foundation's goals rather than the personal drama that had once dominated headlines. The narrative had shifted from scandal to success story, from manipulation to miracle. How do you respond to critics who still question the appropriateness of your relationship's beginning? One reporter asked. Isadora and Dimitri exchanged a look, the kind of silent communication that had developed between couples who truly knew each other. We respond by pointing to our daughter, Dimitri said simply. She's healthy, happy, and loved. She's the proof that our choices were right, regardless of how unconventional they might have seemed. After the press conference, they made rounds through the pediatric wing, visiting with families currently facing the kind of crisis they had once navigated. In the NICU, they met Sarah and Marcus Thompson, whose premature twins were struggling with feeding issues similar to what Serafina had experienced. The doctors say they might not make it, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face as she looked at her tiny sons through the incubator glass. I said the same thing about Serafina, Dimitri replied gently. But sometimes, love finds a way to provide exactly what's needed, even when medicine reaches its limits. Isadora knelt beside Sarah's chair, Serafina babbling happily in her arms. 6 months ago, this was her, she said, showing Sarah a photo from Serafina's early days. Failing to thrive, rejecting all feeding attempts, slowly fading away. What changed? Marcus asked, hope flickering in his eyes. We stopped trying to force solutions and started listening to what she needed, Isadora replied. Sometimes the answer isn't in medical textbooks. Sometimes it's in trusting that love will find a way. They left contact information for the Foundation's new family support services, resources that would have been invaluable during their own crisis. As they walked through the hospital corridors where their love story had begun, Isadora felt the circle of their journey completing itself. We're going to help so many families, she said, bouncing Serafina as they waited for the elevator. We're going to change how people think about infant feeding challenges, Dimitri agreed. Make it less stigmatized, more supported. We're going to honor Elena's memory by saving other babies, Isadora added quietly. The elevator doors opened to reveal the same space where Dimitri had first rushed to his daughter's bedside, desperate and afraid. Now they stood there as a complete family, whole and healed, and ready to help others find the same hope they had discovered. I need to tell you something, Isadora said over breakfast, her hands trembling slightly as she set down her coffee cup. Dimitri looked up from feeding Serafina her morning oatmeal, immediately alert to the tension in his wife's voice. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, she said quickly, then paused. At least I don't think anything's wrong. Serafina babbled impatiently, reaching for the spoon her father had stopped moving in his distraction. The 11-month-old was nothing if not demanding when it came to mealtime. Sorry, princess, Dimitri murmured, resuming the feeding routine while keeping his eyes on Isadora. Talk to me. Isadora took a deep breath, her hand moving unconsciously to her still flat stomach. I'm pregnant. The spoon clattered to the floor as Dimitri went completely still. Serafina protested the interruption with an indignant squeal, reaching for the dropped utensil. Pregnant, he repeated, the words sounding foreign in his mouth. 8 weeks, according to the doctor, Isadora continued, rushing to fill the silence. I know we weren't planning this so soon after the wedding, and with everything that's happened, the foundation launch, all the stress. She was rambling now, nerves making her words tumble together. I know it's complicated timing, and people will probably say we're moving too fast, and Serafina will barely be walking when the baby comes, but— Stop, Dimitri said quietly, standing from his chair with an expression she couldn't read. Isadora's heart sank. This wasn't the reaction she had hoped for, though she couldn't exactly blame him. They had been married less than 6 months, were still navigating the complexities of their blended family, and now she was adding another layer of complication. I understand if you're not ready, she said, her voice small. I understand if this feels like too much, too soon. Instead of responding, Dimitri moved around the table and dropped to his knees beside her chair, his hands covering hers where they rested on her stomach. Are you happy? He asked, his voice rough with emotion she was beginning to recognize. Terrified, she admitted. But yes. Happy. Good, he said, leaning forward to press his forehead against hers. Because I'm over the moon. Relief flooded through her so intensely she felt dizzy. Really? Really? He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Serafina is going to have a sibling, a brother or sister to grow up with, to love and protect and probably terrorize. From her high chair, Serafina seemed to sense the emotional shift in the room. She banged her hands on her tray and made what sounded suspiciously like baby, though at 11 months, her vocabulary was still limited. Did she just— Isadora stared at the baby in amazement. I think our daughter approves, Dimitri said, moving to lift Serafina from her chair. What do you think, princess? Ready to be a big sister? Serafina declared firmly, clapping her hands. Isadora burst into tears, the hormonal, overwhelming tears of a pregnant woman who had just received the support she desperately needed. Hey, Dimitri said, balancing Serafina on one hip while reaching for his wife with his free arm. No crying. This is good news. I know, she sobbed against his shoulder. I never thought I'd get to do this again. Have a baby with someone who wanted it as much as I did. The reference to her previous marriage hung in the air briefly before Dimitri banished it with fierce conviction. This baby is going to be so loved, he said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. By both of us, by Serafina, by Helena, and everyone else in our chosen family. This child is going to grow up knowing they were wanted, planned for, celebrated from the moment we knew they existed. Over the next few weeks, the pregnancy became a source of joy that permeated every aspect of their lives. Serafina seemed to understand that something important was happening, becoming more cuddly and protective of Isadora. She would pat her mother's stomach gently and babble what sounded like baby talk directed at her future sibling. She's going to be an amazing big sister, Helena observed during one of her visits, watching Serafina carefully place her favorite stuffed animal on Isadora's belly. She's already protective, Dimitri agreed, snapping photos of the sweet interaction. Yesterday she cried when I picked Isadora up to carry her upstairs. I think she thought I was hurting her. The foundation work continued, providing a meaningful outlet for their desire to help other families while giving them purpose beyond their own happiness. They had successfully matched 3 families with lactation support services, and 2 premature babies were thriving under innovative feeding protocols developed through their research funding. We're making a real difference, Dr. Morrison reported during their quarterly foundation meeting. The Thompson twins are home and healthy. The Martinez baby is gaining weight, steadily. The protocol we developed based on Serafina's case is being implemented in hospitals across the region. On a quiet Sunday morning, as spring sunshine streamed through the penthouse windows, Dimitri found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Isadora was napping on the couch, her hand resting on her growing belly, while Serafina played contentedly with blocks on the floor nearby. A year ago, he had been a broken man watching his daughter slowly die, convinced that happiness was something that belonged to his past. The idea that he could love again, that his family could grow and thrive, that joy could be rebuilt from the ashes of grief, it would have seemed impossible. Yet here they were. Dada, Serafina called, holding up a block tower she had built with obvious pride. Beautiful work, princess, he said, settling on the floor beside her to admire her architecture. She immediately began building another tower, her concentration absolute. At nearly 12 months old, she was walking confidently, babbling constantly, and showing signs of the intelligence and determination that made both her parents proud. She's going to be walking into things and climbing furniture before we know it, Isadora murmured from the couch, her eyes still closed but her voice amused. Are you worried about keeping up with 2 mobile children? Dmitri asked, moving to sit beside her. Terrified, she admitted, opening her eyes to smile at him. But the good kind of terrified, the kind that comes with anticipating something wonderful. He placed his hand over hers on her belly, feeling the slight roundness that was becoming more pronounced each week. Any thoughts on names? Elena for a girl, Isadora said without hesitation, to honor the woman who made all of this possible. The suggestion made his chest tight with emotion. Giving their daughter his first wife's name would be the ultimate acknowledgement that love could expand rather than replace, that families could be built on the foundation of previous love rather than in spite of it. And for a boy? He asked. Celeste, she said softly. Celeste, if it's a girl middle name. Celeste, if it's a boy first name. So both of our angels are remembered. The perfect symmetry of the suggestion, honoring both the wife he had lost and the daughter she had lost, represented everything beautiful about their unconventional love story. Elena Celeste Voss, he said, testing the name, or Celeste Dmitri Voss. Perfect, Isadora agreed, her eyes drifting closed again as pregnancy fatigue claimed her. As his wife dozed and his daughter played, Dmitri felt a sense of completeness he had thought was lost forever. They had built something beautiful from the worst moments of their lives, created a family that honored the past while embracing the future. The doorbell rang, interrupting his reflection. Helena entered with her usual enthusiasm, carrying shopping bags that undoubtedly contained gifts for Serafina and supplies for the new baby. How are my favorite girls? She asked, swooping down to kiss Isadora's cheek and scoop Serafina into her arms. Growing, Isadora replied, patting her stomach with a smile. Any day now she's going to start showing properly, Helena said, studying her sister-in-law's profile. And then everyone will know about the newest addition to our family. They had decided to keep the pregnancy private for the first trimester, wanting to savor the joy without outside commentary. But soon they would need to share the news publicly, preparing for another round of media attention and social scrutiny. Let them talk, Dmitri said, echoing the sentiment that had become their family motto. We know the truth. We know how much this baby is wanted and loved already. Speaking of which, Helena said, settling into a chair with Serafina on her lap, I have news about Laurent. The mention of Isadora's ex-husband made both of them tense. He had disappeared after the wedding confrontation, but they had learned never to underestimate his capacity for causing trouble. He's getting married, Helena announced, to a woman he met in Vegas 3 months ago. Someone young enough to be his daughter who apparently believes his sob stories about being the victim of a gold-digging ex-wife. Good, Isadora said firmly. Maybe he'll be too busy ruining someone else's life to bother with ours. The important thing is that he's moved on, Dmitri added. We don't have to worry about him disrupting our happiness anymore. As the afternoon progressed, filled with family conversation and baby planning, Dmitri felt the last pieces of their complicated puzzle falling into place. They had faced every challenge thrown at them, social judgment, family tragedy, malicious interference, and emerged stronger for the struggle. That evening, as they performed the bedtime routine that had become sacred family time, Serafina babbled what sounded suspiciously like baby sister while pointing at Isadora's stomach. She knows, Isadora said wonderingly. She really knows there's a baby coming. Children are intuitive about these things, Dmitri replied, lifting his daughter for final goodnight kisses. She probably sensed the change before we did. After Serafina was settled in her crib, they stood in the nursery doorway, watching her drift off to sleep. Soon this room would need to be shared, or they would need to create a new nursery for their second child. Are you happy? Dmitri asked, repeating the question that had become their touchstone. Completely, Isadora replied without hesitation. I never imagined I could be this happy again after losing Celeste. I never thought I'd have the chance to be a mother to multiple children, to build a family with someone who loves me completely. Even with all the complications, the judgment, the unusual beginning, the way people still question our story. Especially because of those things, she said firmly. Anyone can fall in love under perfect circumstances. It takes real love to survive the kind of challenges we've faced and come out stronger. They made their way to their own bedroom, hands intertwined, hearts full of gratitude for the journey that had brought them together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new adventures in building their unconventional family. But tonight they had everything they needed, each other, their daughter sleeping peacefully down the hall, and a new life growing between them. Love, Dmitri reflected as he fell asleep with his wife in his arms, truly could conquer all. It just took courage to believe in it, strength to fight for it, and wisdom to recognize it when it appeared in unexpected forms. Their story had begun with crisis and transformed into triumph. Their family had been built on loss and reborn through hope. Their love had been questioned by many, but proven true by time. And this was only the beginning. Love truly can conquer all. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more incredible true stories about the power of love overcoming every obstacle. What are your thoughts on Dimitri and Isadora's journey? Do you believe some people are destined to find each other, even through tragedy? Have you ever experienced the kind of love that others questioned but you knew was real? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories inspire the content I create. Remember, families aren't always built the way we expect them to, but when love is real, it creates something beautiful regardless of how it begins. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love to heal, transform, and create miracles in the most unexpected ways.